case-based discussion for you two, and overall it's a fourth. Case 6. A 30-year-old patient presented with high spike fever for 2 days. He looks ill and has generalized fatigability. Also has myalgia. His CRP was on admission 160 mg per deciliter. White cell count was 4,000 total, and platelet count was 178,000 per milliliter. Procalcitonin is pending, and blood culture also performed and pending. List your differential diagnosis. How do you arrive at a etiological diagnosis? What is preferred antibiotic therapy? How do you manage this patient? What complications can develop? Think about this case, a 30-year-old patient, that's important. High spike fever for 2 days, so acute history. And generalized fatigability associated with he looks ill. Also has myalgia. Initial CRP is high. PCT is pending. White cell count was low. Leukopenia is there associated with low platelet count. Still it is in the low part, low 150 is the low margin. So it seems there's tendency of platelet count is low. So what is the top? What is the first foremost diagnosis? It is dengue fever, but often it can be leptospirosis or typhus or undifferential fever. So how could you arrive at the etiological diagnosis? Think dengue, we have to do dengue PCR. Day 2, day 3 now we can do. NS1 antigen we can do. But for the testing for anti-dengue, IgM and IgG antibodies, we have to wait up to day 5 to those things to appear. If it is leptospirosis, we can do microscopic agglutination test at around now it's day 4 we can do. But PCR can do, but IgM and IgG antibodies, we have to wait until day 7. It takes time to appear. Typhus, it's also a common condition in Sri Lanka, and it is sporadically prevalent in central part of the country. But time to time, there are maybe another sporadic focus. Foci are there. Typhus immunofluorescence assay or PCR are available. So based on the diagnosis, but more towards it seems dengue or leptospirosis. But typhus, maybe we can elicit peculiar rash, palm and source petechial rash, as well as maybe we can find ESCA, but in fair skin people it's difficult to find. And tick bite, flea bite, we can associate. So what is the empiric therapy? If this kind of patient, if dengue is suspected, we don't want to go with antibiotics or antivirals. There are no available therapy. But if it is geographical locally, if it is around this north central part of the country, we would think leptospirosis would be the top of the list. So penicillin will be adequate, but ceftriaxone also good empiric choice. But if patient is in, as I said, typhus, and so associated this myalgia, everything, calf tenderness, everything goes with, and maybe neurological symptoms, still we can't exclude, but better to add doxycycline as well. Perhaps doxy will provide adequate cover for lepto as well as typhus. But ceftriaxone mainly towards leptospirosis. So how do you manage? Again, based on the etiological diagnosis, management would be. So perhaps anyway, until we get the etiological diagnosis, we do supportive care, empiric antibiotic if required, and QHT. And if dengue is suspected, we have to do platelet count, hematocrit, as well as inflammatory markers, mainly C-reactive protein, and if procalcitonin is available, that will be okay. And clinical condition monitoring. So That's how we would manage. And usually for the lepto, we may give 5 to 7 days. Typhus also similar. With etiological diagnosis without complications, we can discharge the patient. Dengue, mainly it is fluid management, up to 2 days, 3 days, then recovery phase, we have to wait. And leak in phase, then recovery phase. Based on that particular phase, we can manage our patient. And response to the treatment, if it is dengue, perhaps ESR may drop in, but PCT there is no response. But leptospirosis, it is, we can monitor with the CRP and procalcitonin, even typhus also similar. At the same time, we have to do the daily clinical assessment to exclude any complications. What are the complications? In dengue, acute dengue, it goes for hemorrhagic fever and shock. Leptospirosis, it could go for the sepsis, icterus, leading to hepatic failure, and hepatorenal and hepatopulmonary syndromes. And typhus, sepsis and neurological complications can be the foremost. About next case, that is a 30-year-old male presented with fever and jaundice for 3 days. His appetite was reduced remarkably. He looks ill and his right hypochondric tenderness was there and liver was enlarged. No splenomegaly. He drinks alcohol. So social history suggests, as well as focus of infection, it goes to the liver perhaps, and jaundice associated with hepatomegaly. So what additional facts need to ask in the history? Perhaps about the recent food habits, perhaps. We'll say like food intake from street food, as well as it is the commonest etiology, hepatitis A virus, but there are sexual exposure, illicit drug use, likewise hepatitis B and C, we want to think. So what is the diagnosis? That is hepatitis infection. Sorry for this, viral hepatitis. So what are the etiology? Hepatitis A, but B, C, then minor D, E, and G. You want to think. How we arrive at a diagnosis? Perhaps we will do blood test. We do full blood count and C-reactive protein and procalcitonin. At the same time, emerging studies we have conducted, but at the same time, we go for specific panel like hepatitis A, IgM and IgG, hepatitis C also same, and hepatitis B panel, hepatitis B surface antigen, hepatitis B surface antibody, hepatitis E antigen and co-antibody. Likewise, we go for those 6. So common ones first, we have to think IgA, IgG, hepatitis A. Related to this history, it is more towards like hepatitis A, but we can't exclude until proven otherwise. Again, based on the diagnosis, management would vary. But anyway, we have to use supportive therapy, avoid alcohol, because it may worsen the condition. Then if it is hepatitis C, it's a supportive therapy alone only. We may give patient in ascites, we may give spontaneous bacterial peritonitis, patient prone to develop. So we may give prophylaxis for spontaneous bacterial peritonitis. That is, we often give ceftriaxone associated with fragile to suppress the gut microbiota to reduce the amino acid production and acid and gas production in the gut to reduce the functional load to the liver. Then if it is hepatitis C, we may give interferon gamma, even hepatitis B and associated other antivirals if it is required. Okay. And education about the condition, preventive measures are important. About the last case, this is a 6-month-old baby presented with recurrent lung abscess. Child was delivered vaginally and birth weight was 2.5. No birth-related events are documented. At present, weight to age and weight to height is appropriate and HIV was negative. Liver and renal function profiles are normal. Chest X-ray is displayed here. You can appreciate there is abscess is there, okay, in the fluid margin. Right. List the differential diagnosis. Think 6-month-old baby, 6-month-old baby, sorry, and recurrent lung abscess, recurrent. Okay, patient is having due to over last 6 months has had 2 episodes, like we'll say this age, but it's fairly abnormal. And child's birth events, everything are normal. Growth also normal. And organ functions are also normal. But what are the differential diagnoses? Think this could be primary immunodeficiency and manifestation. It can be, there are a lot of, okay. So there are a lot of immunodeficiencies, primary. Prior to that, I would say features that should derive suspicion of an immunodeficiency, whether primary or secondary. So it's to alarm your mind, is it primary immunodeficiency or secondary? Perhaps secondary, it's excluded because HIV is excluded and other malnutrition excluded, and other organ dysfunction, asplenia and splenomegaly, those things also excluded. Liver, renal functions are normal. No any protein losing enteropathy. So altogether, child's secondary immunodeficiencies can be excluded based on the history and investigations up to now, based on the history of the given part. But in that particular case, 6 or more new infection within 12 months. We can't comment much because the child's age is 6 months. 2 or more serious sinus infection or pneumonia within 1 year. Okay, 2 or more episodes of sepsis or meningitis. 2 or more months of antibiotics with little effect, no response. Need to intravenous antibiotics or hospitalization to clear infections. Failure to gain weight, grow normally. Resistant superficial or oral candidiasis. Recurrent tissue or organ abscess, that is the case. Infection with opportunistic organisms such as pneumocystic cerebrotrophy, carina, pneumonia. Complication from a live vaccine such as oral polio. You know it's a live vaccine. Measles, varicella, or BCG. Family history of immunodeficiency or unexplained early death. Unexplained autoimmunity, lymphopenia, and infection. Also, we want to exclude neutropenia as well. So, once these things appear, we won't always think, is it due to query? Is it due to primary immunodeficiency? In a normal child, usually we'll say you may want 4 to 8 respiratory infections per year. Yes. This number varies depending on the presence or absence of risk factors. Risk factors include daycare attendance, school age siblings, and second-hand smoke, passive smoking. Children with atopic diseases seem more likely to develop recurrent and persistent upper respiratory infection. Mind you, it's upper respiratory tract infections or not lower respiratory tract infections or any other conditions. We'll say immunodeficiency. So this child is having an immunodeficiency query. Now we want to find what is the type of immunodeficiency. Is it treatable? Untreatable? Is it curable? Do we need to give prophylactic antibiotics? How to manage this case? We want to get that particular thing. So, primary or secondary immunodeficiency is what I said earlier. So we can, as you know, we learned humoral arm, cellular, complement system, and phagocytic system. Based on that, you can work out what are the immunodeficiencies common. There are a lot of immunodeficiencies, 300 plus line, but there are common ones. So usual defects in knowledge, humoral element are the commonest immune abnormalities that is related to B cell now. Accounting more than 50% of recognized causes of primary immunodeficiency. So now what you have to do? Your history, clue is there, query is there. So now you are going to investigate. You can go with basic investigations. Full blood count, check whether neutrophil count is very high, is it? Or very low. Is there any kind of fluctuation? Cyclic neutropenia. Often it is very high among leukocyte adhesion deficiencies. CGD, chronic granulomatous disease, also can be high, and patient may be having granuloma formation associated with abscess and Staph aureus infections. So other important thing is about the etiological diagnosis. You may forget because child is having abscess. We are thinking child is having primary immunodeficiency. Meanwhile, we want to find what is the etiology for this abscess. Based on that particular etiology, we can think, is it due to humoral, cellular, phagocytic dysfunction or complement deficiency? We'll discuss further. So clinical assessment is very much important. As I said, family history, any early death or related immunodeficiencies, previous episodes related to this about the clinical diagnostic card could be there about the diagnosis, have they recurrent lung abscess, so have they aspirated, found the cause, likewise, what is the susceptibility. So then clinical examination, syndromic features could be there associated with syndromes, then blood test. Age appropriate. Mind you, this is a 18-day-old child. Sorry, 6-month-old child. So you have to have idea about what are the normal ranges of this particular WBC and DC, white cell count and differential count. Lymphopenia. So persistent. Severe combined immunodeficiency. Neutropenia likewise, what I said earlier. So usually it's leukocyte adhesion deficiency, what we learned. Defect in the expression of the adhesion molecules on the neutrophil surface, result in defective chemotaxis. So you can ask from the history, is there any delayed separation of umbilical cord associated with neutropenia later on and predisposed to, like CJD, here also Staphylococcus infection. Okay, so that's very much important. So you should have some kind of idea about how they present, how CJD present, how leukocyte adhesion deficiency is present, like a simple idea. And blood picture, that will be helpful. Giant cytoplasmic granules in the leukocyte in the presence of SME may suggest Chedick-Higashi syndrome. It's a rare one, but can be based on a specific diagnosis. Emergent histitis, like thymic size, could be noted in chest radiograph of newborns with recurrent infection. Absence may suggest Daiichi syndrome. Ultrasound scan abdomen about assessing the spleen are very important. So about the humoral lab, it's a B cell lab. You have to go further. Serum antibody, total serum antibody level, and specific IgM, IgG, IgA levels can assess. Maybe hyper IgM syndrome. IgM is high, but class switching is deranged. So they can't produce IgA, GN, IgA, and IgD, those things. They are more prone to develop infections and autoimmune conditions. And agammaglobulinemia, maybe all the immunoglobulins are less. Likewise, they are we don't expect specifically, but get an idea what is happening. Then humoral deficiency are prone to infections with gram-positive encapsulated organisms such as Streptococcus pneumoniae, gram-positive, and encapsulated gram-negative like Haemophilus influenza and Mycoplasma species. If this child is a Streptococcus pneumoniae, we often think is it humoral deficiency, antibody defect. Then flow cytometer to assess B cells. There is a cluster of differentiation. That is a tag is there on the B cell. So if CD19 particular tag is there or CD20, Based on that pan B cell marker, we can identify are they B cells. Because flow cytometry is a process where which we do plowing all these cells in the blood. We try to identify number our B cells, T cells, neutrophil, peripheral blood monocytes, those things. Okay, so it's a flow cytometry. Based for that, for say this is B cell, there are tags. We may put specific antibodies or markers, and based on that particular marker is present, we say it's B cell. Like CD3, it is pan T cell marker. Likewise. And also we test specific antibodies to vaccines like tetanus, Haemophilus influenzae B, and pneumococcus. We check should be taken whenever possible. Antibodies to given vaccine 4 weeks after the vaccination. We check whether B cells are functioning, because B cells are the one later on turn into activation to plasma cells, and where they produce antibodies. The quantitative assessment of immunoglobulins and helps in the diagnosis of this gamma globulinemia, what I said earlier. Also, it's a tendency to recurrent infections. About the cellular, what I said, flow cytometry, we can do CD3 pan T cell marker. So if CD4 marker is there for helper T cells, while CD8 marker identifies cytotoxic T cells. If etiological diagnosis is Mycobacterium avium intracellular or Pneumocystis carinii or Cherevetsi, which is often represents severe T cell defect. So cellular immune function can also be assessed by the delayed hypersensitivity. This is another way. Like in the antibody checking, here we are type 4 hypersensitivity. We are using skin test to microbial antigens such as Candida albicans. So based on that, because delayed type hypersensitivity, major cell type is T cells. So if there is a defect in delayed type hypersensitivity, it reflects that child is having T cell defect. Okay, that's how we do this. So indirect. Flow cytometry, perhaps direct. We can identify. Then about the complement, there are CH50 hemagglutination assessment, and based on that we can see about the complement pathway, classical pathway, while AH50 would reflect alternative pathway. And recurrent Neisseria infections are hallmark of deficiencies of membrane attack complex C5 to C9. But there are autoimmune diseases where which they, in that particular case, C1, C2, C4, like early complement proteins are absent, and they also more prone to develop infections. About the phagocytes, so we do nitropy tetrasodium test, appears in hospice continuously, and flow cytometry to evaluate oxidative burst. So it is NADPH2 oxidase defect, where once its genetic defect is there, they can't produce oxidative burst. So it's like no functions of granulocytes, mainly neutrophils. So they are more prone to develop staphylococcus and gram-negative, where catalase producing things, Serratia infections, also Klebsiella. So then neutrophil phagocytic and chemolytic function is only assessed, but it's highly specific test done in few laboratories. Perhaps in our country it is not done. How do you manage? Basic principles. So once you know the diagnosis, you can manage the particular condition. Mainly treat existing infection. That's the foremost important. Otherwise, patient will die. Avoid further infection. That is prevention. Then correct the immunodeficiencies. That is the cure. That's how it should go. So treatment, that is gamma globulin infusion. So procedure that supplements your child's immune system with additional antibodies. This is given for children with gamma globulinias. Then antibiotics. we have to treat. Like other drugs, there are a lot of drugs, immunomodulators, based on the particular primary immunodeficiencies we would cure. Prevention, it's mainly hygienic measures. Healthier diet, avoiding raw undercooked foods that may contain bacteria. So we have used filtered or bottled water. Avoid exposure to infection and practicing good personal hygiene. That's very important. Then about the cure. Hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. You know, stem cells are single cells with two unique qualities. They can make many copies of themselves and they can develop into a variety of specialized cells because these are stem cells. So here we do is it's a transplantation, cellular transplantation. So hematopoietic stem cell transplantation can be done. Read bit about this. Then gene therapy using vector virus, we can engulf particular gene, the NADPH2 defect, we'll say, oxidase pathway. So we can give a gene adjoined to the virus, and that particular gene we can incorporate into patient's chromosomes. Then later on, they are capable of producing NADPH2. That's how it goes. Thank you.